Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that your greatest failure was not the end, but the exact beginning of your fortune? There are moments in life when defeat strikes so hard, it feels like the world itself is conspiring against you. You lose the job, the business folds, the relationship ends, and yet within that wreckage lies something far more valuable than any temporary success, the spark of a fortune waiting to be ignited. Stay with me today, because I will not only show you how failure is the gateway to greatness, but how it is necessary for it. I will share with you how the most successful individuals, those who created legacies of wealth, influence, and power, first stumbled, fell, and nearly gave up. But they discovered a truth most never will. Failure is life's way of testing your readiness for success. Let us begin. Failure, my friends, is not a signal to stop, but an invitation to begin. Every failure carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. That is not philosophy, it is principle. Think back on your own life. Has there not been a time when what looked like defeat became the thing that pushed you towards something better? But here's the key. You must search for that seed. That seed lies hidden, not handed. It requires something deep within a burning desire. Desire, when it is strong enough, will transform obstacles into tools. It is what turns wounds into wisdom, losses into leverage, and failures into fortune. The road from failure to fortune begins with a decision. Will you rise or will you retreat? And once you decide to rise, you must believe. Faith is the mind's alchemy. With it, you turn invisible ideas into tangible results. You see a vision of your fortune not as it is, but as it will be, and the world responds to that belief. Now understand this. Fortune does not smile upon those who try once. It rewards the persistent. If you are unwilling to persist, your failure becomes permanent. But if you continue, push forward, and outlast the setbacks, you become stronger, wiser, and more deserving. So you must also be clear. Definiteness of purpose is what turns scattered energy into power. Without purpose, failure is confusion. But with it, failure becomes feedback redirection, not rejection. Finally, remember this. Your thoughts are builders. What you dwell on, you move toward. Think of wealth, you attract its lessons. Think of success, and your actions align with its principles. Every fortune begins first in the mind, shaped, refined, and made real through action. So I ask you, are you willing to reframe your failures, to see them not as your enemy, but your greatest ally? If so, then you are already on the path. Because fortune is not found, it is forged, and it is forged in the fire of failure. Every defeat you encounter in life, whether personal, professional, financial, or emotional, contains within it a seed, a hidden possibility of an equal or even greater success. This is not merely an abstract idea or hopeful optimism. It is a principle rooted in the very fabric of personal achievement. When failure strikes, it often does so violently, breaking plans, shattering expectations, and bruising the ego. But for the individual who chooses to study that failure rather than curse it, to ask why it occurred and what lesson lies within, the experience becomes invaluable. Success is rarely a straight climb to the top. More often, it is a zigzag through dark valleys of misjudgment, rejection, and mistakes. But in those valleys, one finds the tools, the clarity, and the character necessary to ascend. Consider the story of Thomas Edison, a man who failed over 10,000 times while attempting to create the electric light bulb. To most, that would be an unbearable weight of defeat. To Edison, each failure was not a stop sign, but a revelation. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Every single misstep brought him closer to understanding what would work. And that persistence, that ability to interpret defeat as progress, gave the world one of its most transformative inventions. What if he had stopped at failure number 500 or 5,000? The seed of his eventual triumph was planted in every failed attempt, each one nourishing the roots of innovation. Another powerful example is that of Walt Disney. Early in his career, he was fired by a newspaper editor because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. He faced multiple business failures, including a studio that went bankrupt. But these defeats, rather than destroying him, taught him how to build better, to dream bigger, and to protect his intellectual property with vigilance. In fact, the loss of rights to his early creation, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, led to the birth of Mickey Mouse, an idea born directly from the pain of betrayal and failure. The crushing defeat was not the end. It was the pivot that launched a global empire. The seed of Disney's fortune was wrapped tightly in the bitter shell of creative and financial loss. Even in personal struggles, this truth holds firm. A person who experiences a failed relationship often emerges, if reflective, with a clearer sense of self, a deeper understanding of human connection, and a more defined view of what they truly value. The pain becomes a teacher, the hurt becomes a map, and if one chooses to learn from it, they can enter the next chapter of life with a far more powerful emotional compass capable of navigating not just love, but leadership, empathy, and resilience. The success, whether in future relationships or broader life endeavors, would not be possible without that defeat. It was the crucible in which wisdom was forged. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. And more than that, it is the foundation of it when seen through the right lens. For every individual who has risen above mediocrity to build something meaningful, the road was littered with disappointments that contained clues, experiences that burned but branded them with strength. The key is not to avoid failure, but to extract the seed it contains, to recognize it, nurture it, and allow it to grow into the next opportunity, the next breakthrough, the next victory. Burning desire is not a wish or a passing hope. It is an obsession, a fire so intense that it consumes doubt, overcomes delay, and pushes the individual beyond every obstacle that life may throw in their path. This kind of desire does not negotiate with excuses or surrender to setbacks. It transforms adversity into fuel, disappointment into drive, and defeat into determination. When a man or woman possesses burning desire, failure becomes a mere inconvenience, a temporary detour rather than a dead end. It is this inner flame that distinguishes those who merely want from those who will. The setback to the average mind is a reason to stop. But to the mind saturated with desire, it is a challenge to be met, a puzzle to be solved, a stepping stone to something greater. Consider the story of Henry Ford. Before he revolutionized the automobile industry, Ford failed multiple times. His early ventures, Detroit Automobile Company and the Henry Ford Company, collapsed under the weight of financial mismanagement and internal disagreements. He faced ridicule from investors, skepticism from peers, and even betrayal from business partners. Yet none of these setbacks diminished his desire. On the contrary, each failure sharpened his focus. He studied what went wrong, adjusted his approach, and pressed forward. It was his burning desire to create a car for the common man, not just the wealthy elite, that propelled him past these obstacles. That desire was so consuming that he worked tirelessly on designing a new system of production, ultimately giving birth to the moving assembly line. This innovation not only cut production costs, but reshaped modern industry. Had Ford lacked intense desire, the discouragement of early defeats would have buried him. But because his desire burned hotter than his failures, he used every setback as a step upward. Another vivid example is Oprah Winfrey. Born into poverty in Mississippi, subjected to abuse and hardship in her youth, she faced every imaginable emotional and social obstacle. Early in her career, she was fired from her job as a television reporter because she was deemed unfit for TV. But where others may have accepted such a judgment, Oprah's desire to connect with people, to share stories, and to inspire transformation was stronger than the sting of rejection. That deep, relentless desire pushed her to keep trying, to reframe her setbacks as necessary detours, and to keep building her craft. She didn't simply recover from failures, she used them as lessons. Her desire to rise above her circumstances and to serve others with authenticity transformed each stumbling block into a launch pad. Eventually, she became not only a media mogul, but a global force of influence, inspiration, and empowerment. Burning desire is the great equalizer. It does not care where you started or what you have lost. It asks only one thing: how badly do you want it? It is in that depth of want, in that unwavering hunger, that you find the power to convert any defeat into a platform for the next move forward. When desire is strong enough, nothing remains a failure for long. The mind, energized by obsession, refuses to let go of the goal. It finds a way through the wall, around the wall, or under the wall, but it finds a way. And in this relentless pursuit, even the most crushing of defeats is eventually turned into a stepping stone laid beneath the feet of the determined, leading upward to triumph. Faith is the bridge between the unseen and the seen, the invisible world of thought and the visible realm of material success. It is the mental alchemy that transmutes ideas, dreams, and desires into reality. When a person holds a vision in their mind with unwavering belief, they magnetize themselves to the circumstances, people, and opportunities necessary to bring that vision to life. Faith, when deeply rooted, has a creative power unlike any other force in the human mind. It bypasses logic, scoffs at impossibility, and refuses to bow to obstacles. Ideas in their infancy are intangible. They cannot be touched, measured, or sold. But when an individual breathes faith into those ideas, they begin to take shape, drawing life from the certainty with which they are held. Faith acts like the blueprint of an architect, guiding every action, every decision, and every step forward with the confidence that what is imagined must become real. Take, for example, the story of Colonel Harlan Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken. In his 60s, with nothing more than a fried chicken recipe and a vision, he set out to convince restaurants to buy his concept. He was not a young entrepreneur backed by venture capital. He was a man with a simple idea and an extraordinary belief in it. Over 1,000 restaurants rejected him before he finally found a partner willing to give him a chance. Most people would have stopped after 10, 50, or maybe even 100 rejections. But Sanders moved forward because he believed beyond doubt that his idea had value, that his product would eventually be embraced, and that success was not a matter of chance, but a matter of faith sustained through persistence. He could see something others could not, the image of his chicken empire long before it existed in any tangible form. That vision, held in his mind with certainty, eventually became real. Today, the golden image of his face is recognized around the world, not because his idea was guaranteed, but because he treated it as if it were. Another compelling example is that of Steve Jobs, a man who spoke often about the power of belief in the unseen. When he and Steve Wozniak built the first Apple computer in a garage, they were not responding to a market demand. There was no demand. Computers were thought of as tools for corporations and scientists, not for the average person. But Jobs had an idea, a belief that every home would one day contain a personal computer. That vision was absurd to many, but he didn't just hope it could be done, he believed it would be. That belief influenced the way he communicated, the decisions he made, and the products he pushed into existence. Even after being ousted from his own company, Jobs did not let go of his vision. He kept building, kept imagining, and eventually returned to lead Apple into an era that transformed not just the company, but the world. His unwavering faith in his ideas, even when no one else saw what he saw, was the catalyst that turned concepts into products and products into billion-dollar breakthroughs. Faith is not passive. It is active. It drives movement, creates resilience, and fosters innovation. When a person believes in an idea with such intensity that they act as if it is already real, they unconsciously begin to behave in ways that make its manifestation inevitable. They speak differently. They work longer. They recover faster. Their very presence communicates certainty, and that certainty becomes contagious, attracting collaborators, supporters, and investors. Others begin to see what the believer sees. What was once a fragile thought in the quiet of the mind becomes a visible, touchable, profitable reality. Persistence is the silent power that stands when every other force has failed. It is not flashy. It does not shout. It does not seek attention, but it endures. And in the face of failure, rejection, criticism, fatigue, and uncertainty, persistence quietly says, one more step. It is persistence, not talent, not intelligence, not even opportunity, that separates those who rise from those who remain stuck. Many begin with bold dreams, lofty goals, and great enthusiasm, but when adversity strikes, their enthusiasm fades. They lack the one quality that guarantees eventual success, the refusal to quit. Persistence is the steady pressure that wears down resistance. It is the pounding of the ocean against the cliff, the chisel against the stone, the voice within that says, I will not give up even after the world has told you that you should. Time and time again, history has shown that those who win are not always the most gifted, but the most stubbornly determined to keep going. Consider the journey of J.K. Rowling. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, she was a struggling single mother living on welfare, writing in cafes, battling depression, and barely able to make ends meet. When she completed her manuscript, she submitted it to numerous publishers only to face rejection after rejection. 12 major publishing houses turned her down. Some claimed the book was too long. Others said it wouldn't sell. Any one of those rejections could have ended the journey. Many aspiring writers have abandoned their manuscripts for far less, but Rowling persisted. She believed in her story, and more importantly, she believed in finishing what she started. That quiet but unshakable persistence eventually led her to Bloomsbury Publishing, which agreed to publish the first book on the advice of an editor's 8-year-old daughter who fell in love with the manuscript. What followed was a literary and cinematic empire. But that empire was born not from luck or even brilliance alone. It was born from relentless persistence in the face of overwhelming discouragement. So another powerful example is Abraham Lincoln. Few figures in history have experienced more political and personal setbacks. Before becoming President of the United States, Lincoln lost multiple elections, failed in business, and endured deep personal tragedies. He was defeated for the state legislature, for Congress, for the Senate again and again. To the casual observer, his career was a string of losses, but Lincoln refused to surrender. He viewed each failure not as a verdict, but as a lesson. His persistence forged resilience, sharpened his convictions, and built the character necessary for leadership. When he finally rose to the presidency, it was not as a man untested by life, but as a man who had been forged in the fires of continual disappointment. And it was this persistence that enabled him to lead a nation through its most trying hour, to hold fast during civil war, and to ultimately preserve the Union. Persistence is not measured in how quickly you achieve your goal, but in how many times you're willing to begin again after being knocked down. Every comeback in history, whether in business, politics, sports, or personal life, has been fueled by the will to continue when quitting would have been easier. It is the daily decision to show up, to try again, to learn, adjust, and move forward despite setbacks. Those who persist develop a power greater than natural genius. They develop grit. And grit is what carries the human spirit through storms, through rejection, through pain and pressure, until success is no longer a possibility, but a certainty earned by endurance. Definiteness of purpose is the foundational principle upon which all lasting success is built. It is the clear, unwavering understanding of what you want and why you want it. Without it, life becomes scattered, distracted, and reactive, chasing one thing today, another tomorrow, pulled by whims and the opinions of others. But with it, every action, every decision, and every step forward is guided by an inner compass that keeps you on course. The individual with definiteness of purpose is like a ship with a precise destination programmed into its navigation system. It may face storms, detours, and even periods of stillness, but it never loses its direction. On the other hand, a person without a definite aim becomes like a ship adrift at sea, tossed by the waves of circumstance, changing course with every gust of wind, ultimately arriving nowhere with great efficiency. A vivid example of the power of definiteness of purpose can be found in the life of Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie didn't stumble upon wealth or happen into success. From a young age, he had a clear and burning purpose: to rise above poverty and create a business empire in the steel industry. But even deeper than that, his purpose extended beyond wealth. It included the elevation of mankind through philanthropy, education, and access to knowledge. His definiteness of purpose drove him with such clarity that he was able to identify opportunities others overlooked. While many in his day focused on short-term profits or played it safe in traditional markets, Carnegie poured his energy into the growing infrastructure needs of America. He studied steel, invested in it, innovated its production, and eventually dominated the industry. But every move he made was aligned with his singular aim. This clarity allowed him to say no to distractions, yes to calculated risks, and never to giving up. His purpose directed his mind, his money, and his management, transforming him from a poor immigrant into one of the wealthiest men of his time. Another compelling illustration is seen in the story of Elon Musk. Regardless of public opinion, financial risk, or monumental challenges, Musk has demonstrated an extraordinary level of definiteness of purpose. His mission has never been simply to make money. It has been to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy and to make humanity a multiplanetary species. These are not vague goals. They are definite, measurable, and clearly defined purposes that inform everything he builds, whether it's Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, or the Boring Company. Because of that clarity, Musk is able to endure setbacks that would break most entrepreneurs. Rockets explode, deadlines are missed, critics swarm, and industries resist. Yet he stays on course. That is the power of definiteness. It sharpens focus, builds resilience, and channels energy into productive action. It makes your decisions easier, your progress faster, and your vision stronger than the resistance around you. In the absence of purpose, talent is wasted, time is squandered, and potential remains dormant. People drift from job to job, idea to idea, relationship to relationship, never quite building anything lasting because they are operating without a compass. But the person who knows exactly what they want begins to attract the right people, seize the right opportunities, and align their habits with their goals. They are not easily distracted because they have something to protect, a purpose that matters. Whether that purpose is to build a company, raise a family, transform a community, or pioneer new frontiers, the key is clarity. Once the mind is made up, once the target is locked in, the entire personality begins to organize around it. Thoughts become focused, emotions become disciplined, and energy becomes directed. The wandering ends and the building begins not by chance, but by choice guided by a definite aim. Every structure ever built by man, cathedrals, empires, fortunes, or failures began first as a thought. The mind is the drafting table upon which the blueprint of your future is drawn. Every belief you hold, every idea you allow to take root, every image you consistently dwell upon is quietly constructing the life you will one day live. Most people drift through life unaware that their dominant thoughts are not just idle notions, but building materials. Whether they think in terms of fear or faith, lack or abundance, defeat or victory, those thoughts set the boundaries of what is possible for them. The human mind is not passive. It is a creative force. What it dwells upon, it tends to materialize. If you think consistently in terms of limitation, you will find yourself limited. If you think in terms of expansion, growth, and prosperity, then opportunity begins to appear not magically, but as a direct result of what your mind is actively seeking. A striking example of this can be seen in the life of Jim Carrey, the renowned actor and comedian. Long before he reached global fame, Carrey was broke and struggling in Los Angeles. He would drive up to Mulholland Drive, park his car, and visualize himself as a successful actor. He imagined directors praising his work and crowds responding to his performances. He didn't just daydream. He believed with conviction that his vision would come true. In a symbolic act of faith, he wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered and dated it 5 years into the future. He carried that check in his wallet, looking at it often, allowing that thought to dominate his mind. And just before that self-imposed deadline expired, he received a movie role that paid him exactly $10 million. The idea lived in his thoughts before it ever appeared in his bank account. His success was not born in the audition room. It was built brick by brick in the theater of his mind. This principle is equally evident in the life of inventors and innovators like Nikola Tesla. Tesla possessed such a vivid and controlled imagination that he could construct complex machines entirely in his mind, running them, improving them, and understanding their function long before he ever touched a tool. He once said, "My method is different. I do not rush into actual work. When I get an idea, I start at once building it up in my imagination." For Tesla, the mind was not just a place of inspiration. It was a laboratory of precision and power. His thoughts created the future he would step into. Even though many of his ideas were initially dismissed or misunderstood, the clarity and consistency of his thinking eventually gave the world alternating current, radio, and much of the technological foundation upon which modern society is built. Your present circumstances are a reflection of your past thoughts, just as your future conditions will reflect what you consistently think today. The thoughts you nourish, the beliefs you reinforce, and the inner dialogue you repeat to yourself are laying the foundation of your future. This truth does not care about your background, your education, or your present limitations. The mind does not distinguish between reality and imagination. It simply accepts what you give it most often. Think in terms of defeat, and your behavior begins to conform to that image. Think in terms of achievement, and your mind begins to scan the environment for possibilities. Thought leads to feeling, feeling leads to action, and action leads to results. Every architect begins with a vision and then sets to work turning it into reality. You are the architect of your life, and your mind is the drafting table. The question is, what kind of future are you designing through the thoughts you entertain each day? Thank you.